Hey guys, Thomas Sulu Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie The House with a Clock in Its Walls. Quite a mouthful, but that's totally fine. So, this movie features Jack Black as Jonathan, or as I refer to him as just John. Uh, the character on the left is named Florence, and the kid is Luis, or Lewis. Or as he's called by the other kids, very briefly anyway, Goggles. But I'll just call him Lewis for the purposes of review. So, anyways, it starts with some narration about John's character apologizing to Lewis about his parents passing away, and that he would promptly pick him up, being a caretaker slash uncle to him. As they head off the bus, a clock rings off, and they both sort of vaguely look at it for a moment and just sort of are prompted to move along. Their neighbor, when they arrive, kind of voices her concern. And as they approach inside the house, we see has very various clocks, and we are also introduced to Florence. The relationship between Florence and John is to consistently mock each other throughout the movie. That is the way that they show their friendship, as they sort of vaguely say that it's not supposed to be, but it is. Anyway, the house has a tendency, or the items within the house have a tendency to move, but the kid doesn't realize that quite yet. And when he arrives in the room, he starts to mourn over his parents as well. So, the first indication that Lewis notices that something is going on is that they on the next day are playing cards, and they start to change on him, and that allows him to win. And he just looks at the cards as like, that was weird. So, Florence talks about her past very briefly, saying that something happened with her, but that comes up a little bit later on. But Lewis, afterwards, gets into the late night and starts hearing noises, so he goes on about getting spooked. The kid definitely screams quite a bit throughout the movie, so just preemptive warning on that. If that's something that annoys you, then there's quite a bit of it. So, as I mentioned, afterwards, after sleeping off, he has to go to school, and as I mentioned, he gets called Goggles, as the two teams on either dodgeball or I think it was just basketball teams are trying not to pick him. But he does get picked last, and afterwards he meets with this other kid who I just, in my notes, I know his name was like Tober or Toby or something like that, but I just kept calling him the voter kid because that was his entire gimmick. He was trying to be nice throughout the movie in order to get all these votes to win this thing. So that's his whole spiel. So it cuts back to Lewis now in bed, seeing his mom, and the mom warns Lewis of a potential danger within the context of the house. Excuse me. Whew. So, where was I? Oh yes. So he's moving on. He's moving on along, trying to get out of the house, but the house starts moving along after seeing John use his axe to cut something that we never actually really figure out what it was, but he starts to see the pictures moving, and an army set bumps into him, and he gets blocked by a moving chair. So, John, seeing how all this is going on, decides to tell him that this entire house was imbued by magic, and that he himself is considered a warlock, and that he knew a previous bad warlock by the name of Isaac. So, Lewis begs to become a warlock. So, he starts to read notes and passes the questions with flying colors. And we have the tiger that its entire purpose of the movie is to poop for the kids, I guess. You know, very low brow stuff. And we also see, or saw in the trailer, this tentacle like creature that was in a specific room that's there very briefly. So, John warns Lewis afterwards about a specific cabinet that he should never open, even though previously he said there were no rules to this house. So, he changed his mind to indicate that that was now the only rule. So, he has a flashback when he's on his own where he and Isaac were former teammates. And Florent joins him in afterwards. So, we cut back to the school where the voter kid tells, or Toby or whatever his name is, tells Lewis to lose the goggles in order for him to look cooler or whatever. And Lewis is very clearly continuing trying to impress this kid for whatever reason. As he is also practicing to learn his first spell. So, we cut back to the house where John plays some nice jazzy music, and the water that is within the vicinity starts to sprinkle and dip out and turn into all these stars and planets, and Lewis is very impressed by this, but then Poop Tiger, that's what I'll just call him, does his work on Lewis. So, he talks about afterwards, after getting cleaned up, John talks about his dad not liking him going into magic in the first place. And while that's going on, Lewis is continuing to practice the magic and then gets Jack to float behind him, and then their hijinks ensues. So now he's starting to use magic very briefly at school, unbeknownst to the students, even though there seemed to be an implication that there was this one girl who might have seen him do it, but she doesn't really say or do anything throughout the entire movie until the very, very end. And while that's going on, we hear that these gongs, or I'll just call them gongs, are going off, and there are 3 of them, and how last time there was 4, but now there is 3, so there is some sort of countdown implication going on. So, Lewis is getting used to these spells now, and again, the voter kid they're at school, and, the voter kid wants to leave Lewis behind, so Lewis tries to convince the voter kid to come, saying that he will try to use actual real magic. So, while that's going on, back at the house, John is using this, I forget what the name of it is, but like that doctor hearing tool. I'm sorry if I'm the stethoscope or something like that. Anyway, to listen around, and manages to find a secret passage. So, Lewis brings that voter kid, Toby, back. I'm just gonna call him Toby. I don't think that was his name. Like, he had some weird part to his name, but I'll just call him Toby. slash voter kid. So they get to the cabinet that Lewis was forbidden from opening, and they open it to find that there is a large book. And the voter kid slash Toby opens the book and sees that there is a note in it about raising the dead, and Lewis wants to have none of that going on, at least right now, so he gets him to leave. Meanwhile, John notes a reference to Judgment Day via this schematic that he found. And Lewis, in the meantime, sees his mom again. And the mom seems even more suspicious now, more than ever before, saying that he should very clearly take that evil book and not listen to anything that John says. And the lack of suspicion on Lewis definitely is a little bit bizarre, but nonetheless. That girl I did refer to earlier tries to talk to Lewis about spiders, but he's like kind of just moves along pretty quickly. More so that he can try to impress the other kid, the voter kid, and tells him that he will indeed raise the dead. So he leads them to the grave, where they get led from the book to this specific location. And he does indeed do the spell correctly, raising one of the dead. And the voter kid slash Toby immediately leaves, and Lewis does another freak-out scream and leaves as well. So he returns the book left and hides it, and now there are only 2 gongs left. So, Lewis, seeing now that the house is stopping, it's used to like respond to him, and now it's not. In other rooms, these other objects are going nuts, and oh, so conveniently, the person that was brought back was Isaac himself. So, John and Florence learn about this, but Florence says she doesn't want to use magic, even though later on it's made very clear as to why. So, the house pictures start to change to indicate that there is potential doom coming along in this little group. So, Florence goes toward that and moves around with Lewis to show Isaac and John were best friends, and that he went into these dark woods to gain some sort of power or knowledge. She then finally discusses why she lost her powers, in which she was hurt on the inside, which apparently prevents her from using magic. So we cut back to the school where Lewis is trying to get the voter kid back on his side, and then he beats him down in like this other area. And Lewis afterwards returns back to the house. He goes into the room where the book was and sees that all these other books are trying to attack him and fly around, and he does another freak-out scream. But they manage to get the schematics out, and they work on a decoder in an open area. So, John goes up ahead on the house, and others follow behind. And he shows that he has this skull key, which Isaac summoned earlier through the flashbacks, which I neglected to mention, but he did do that. And Lewis finally admits that he was the one that rose Isaac, and that gets John super frustrated and wants to leave him behind. And Florence goes at him saying that being a parent is a 24-hour gig in which the entire point of it is to, you know, sort of be afraid for your children. So, Lewis, in the meantime, warns the neighbor that Isaac got to her house, and she's sort of ushered into this house. So, John locks a door, or a door locks for him. I forgot which one it was, but while that's going on, the neighbor reveals that she was this other evil witch that they talked about, and I also neglected to mention in my notes. And she also reveals that she was doubled down as the mom character as well. So, John and Florence were locked in the room. John does his little, what I would only describe as a Jack Black freak out, and as he's squeezed out of the room, and then Florence gets out as well pretty easily. So they're running to get to Lewis. So the two of them end up getting tied up and caught, as Lewis was also caught and moved into the secret hidden passage. And Isaac, the zombie Isaac, tells them more about the Dark Forest and how he summoned this demon named Azazel in order to get these powers in the first place. So Florence finally decides that her body is now fixed and that she is now able to use the magic, using one of the key words that Lewis had been saying probably a few times throughout the movie. I believe the word was abominable. So Isaac does manage to get the key, though. And as they head their way out, the three of them set out to chase, and they are brought up against all these separate items, and I'll call them dolls, and all three of them are grabbed and thrown outside, where they're met up with pumpkins that spit at them, and the pumpkins have these, their juices or whatever you want to call it, are like get them all stuck. But they manage to wiggle their way out and beat down the pumpkins. And John is waking up from his quick knockout, but he managed to do an actual magic spell, so he's getting back into it now. So they get inside, and Lewis tries to use his own magic, using his own way, as they put it, in this magic 8-ball that he had previously. He had gotten it from his parents. And he does overact it. He does go a little bit, like, to the next level of acting, of, like, overacting, as I put it. And they manage to fight off the remaining pumpkins as they work their way back inside. And they also fend off the tiger that almost attacks them as well. They are able to knock down the dolls inside with Florence using a spray from her umbrella magic. So they work their way under the boiler room where they got the secret location. However, Florence immediately gets grabbed by the tentacle creature, and John and Lewis are the ones who have to move forward. And Isaac opens up this door to this Armageddon that he has set out for the world as John and Lewis were knocked back. And they try to rush in, but again, they get blasted down. And John gets blasted again, but now the second time he gets knocked down to a baby form. So it is now up to Lewis to head up ahead to face all the future plight and all that stuff. So he uses the 8-ball and throws it into the gears to stop the gears from turning and everyone from aging backwards. So he creates one of those kinetic energy balls that they were practicing earlier and blasts Isaac and his fellow witch and vanishes both of them into non-existence. So as they work their way back up, John now being fully restored, they get greeted by Florence, who was able to deal with her problem, and it cuts to them essentially just getting back to the house, or, making their way out. So, it cuts after that to Lewis, however many days later, or the next day, I guess, is there's another team setup of basketball or whatever sport it was, and the team's leader's not wanting to pick him again, but he uses a little bit of magic, as actually seen in the trailer as well, and hits both of the kids, and then decides to actually talk to Rose, who talks to him back, and then they both head outside. And they both get inside, or he gets inside the car with John and Florence, and they get back to the house, and the movie ends. And it was pretty good. There were a bit of moments where it was clearly meant for a younger audience, very clearly, as I indicated. The kid did again do that one moment where he did go a little bit overboard with the whole spell thing and just kind of went nuts with it. Definitely could have toned that down a little bit. But other than that, yeah, it was pretty good. So I'd give it a 6 out of 10. I thought it was pretty enjoyable. Just a few little things that could have worked to definitely spruce up the acting portion of it, and just probably. I don't know if removing the whole poop joke would have done anything, really. It's just a waste of time, but whatever. Anyways, that is my review with the house with a clock in its walls. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out that link in the description. I head you over to my Patreon page, and any donations are really appreciated. Until next time, everyone, bye-bye.